Texas is in. Joy. I mean it. True joy. Florida State is out. Injustice. The college football playoff. I wrung my hands about this all weekend long. Of course, starting Saturday after Texas dominated Oklahoma State. And then Alabama beat Georgia. I stayed up late enough to realize that Florida State was going to beat Louisville. And Sunday morning and late Saturday night was an all-out, quite honestly, persuasion campaign for my partisan tendencies towards the Longhorns to get them into the college football playoff. But I do not think it was necessary. The Horns were going to the college football playoff. Sunday, 12:30 Eastern Time. The selection show is going down right as after I have boarded the plane and we are taxiing to the runway. I'm streaming it on my phone. And when I see the Texas Longhorns come up at number 3, I raised my fist in the air so hard it hit the ceiling, and everybody around me thought I was a terrorist. I looked around and smiled because I thought surely there's other people on this flight headed to Dallas that are also watching the college football selection show, and nobody else seemed to be. No, they thought I was a terrorist, so I kind of let out a half-hearted hook 'em. I got nothing. Now, I put a hook 'em horn sign up. I got nothing, but I do think they then understood I was just crazy, not a terrorist. The seedings are 1, Michigan, 2, Washington, 3, Texas, 4, Alabama. On the outside looking in, 5, Florida State, 6, Georgia. Let's start with joy. It truly was joy. Texas got better as the season went along. Texas dominated Texas Tech. Texas dominated Oklahoma State. They're not the most impressive victories on any particular team's resume. But if you watch Texas in the Big 12 championship game, I do think you would have seen something that needed to convince you on a qualitative standard that Texas belonged in the college football playoff. And that's the play of Quinn Ewers. The quarterback from Texas was phenomenal. Something like 450 yards passing. He's so good, in fact, in that game, that I'm worried he's now going to reconsider and perhaps enter the NFL draft. Then there is Florida State. Florida State goes undefeated, 13-0, in a Power 5 conference and is boxed out of the college football playoff in what I think can only be described as an injustice. There are 2 ways that everybody looks at this debate. Do we pick the 4 best teams? Do we pick the 4 most deserving teams? If you're picking the 4 best teams that have to have some quantitative metric to back up that they are the 4 best teams, I think that you would arrive at the exact playoff that was given to you by the College Football Playoff Committee. I think you would arrive at Michigan, Washington, Texas, and Alabama. But we have to have some humility in what it means to be the best team. And when we're deciding the best team, it can't just be our subjective opinion. It can't be Vegas odds. It can't be Plato's shadows on a cave wall of strength of schedule or strength of record. These are all things we use to run hypotheticals on games in our mind. When we have things that have happened on the field to give us real evidence on who are the best teams. And I don't think it's one and the same as the most deserving, but I think there is a blend that does have to lead you back towards Florida State over Alabama. I think the best evidence for that is the way everyone saw Oregon all season long. Vegas favored Oregon by 9.5 over Washington on Friday night. Everyone thought Oregon was undoubtedly a top 4 team. And what happened? Oregon lost to Washington for the second time this season because the game has to be played on the field. I was rooting for Georgia to beat Alabama because I thought it was the easiest path for Texas. In retrospect, I was completely wrong. By virtue of Alabama beating Georgia, we put ourselves in a position where Alabama couldn't get in as the SEC champion to the college football playoff unless Texas was also in the playoff. Texas beat Alabama on the field. handily in Tuscaloosa by 10 points. It wasn't a fluke. It was convincing. And for anybody that says, oh, well, that was week 2 and Alabama's gotten better and Jalen Milroe's gotten better. Well, so is Texas. And at what point are we evaluating Alabama? Last week, when they needed a Hail Mary on 4th and 31 to beat 5-6 Auburn? We have to honor what happened on the field, and Texas beat Alabama. So when Alabama beat Georgia, all of a sudden I realized, oh my gosh, Texas is in the college football playoffs. All my buddies started texting me and saying, yeah, we're in. I mean, we were nervous, but it added up logically. We're in now. If Georgia had won, it would have forced a Texas versus Florida State debate. And maybe it would have gone the same way as Florida State versus Alabama. I don't know. We'll never know. But I don't know why I thought Georgia needed to win. I was worried for the exact reason that Florida State should have been worried. The way the College Football Playoff Committee would view Alabama. The way they view the SEC. Florida State lost a debate to Alabama in a committee room based upon reputation. Alabama in the conversation as the SEC champion and having just beat Georgia. Georgia fans held on to the idea that they may be in the college football playoff, but that was never going to happen. You can't lose your last game of the season. I mean, that's almost a lock. You didn't win a championship. You didn't win the SEC championship. You lost to Auburn. It's not you lost to Alabama. It's not simply the 4 best teams. Otherwise, it's cake baking. It's ice skating. It's just a judging competition. So Georgia had to be out. Ohio State was never in the conversation. Oregon was now out. That left Florida State and Alabama. And the place that Florida State found themselves was dealing with a conference and a team that carries a reputation beyond any one single season, beyond one program, beyond one team, and will always win debates against other teams with close margin based upon history, based upon SEC. I'm not telling you it's right. I'm just telling you the way it is. Ari Wasserman in The Athletic wrote, but Alabama, like peers Georgia and Ohio State, teams with a wealth of raw talent on their rosters, lost a game at home. Better teams have been left out in the past than this Alabama team because losses have consequences. Alabama's loss to Texas didn't have a consequence because we're enamored with the SEC and what it means to beat Georgia. It didn't matter that Alabama, though perceived to be an entirely different team in September, lost to the Longhorns. That game could have been a playoff game in September. It turns out it was an exhibition. There are plenty of people who are against the expansion of the field to 12 playoff teams because they argue the regular season has sanctity. The games matter. That's what makes college football different. That every single weekend is supposed to matter. But it didn't, says Wasserman, because Alabama losing to Texas in the end didn't matter. He goes on, but if the games in the regular season aren't going to matter when it comes to picking the Final Four, then there are no consequences for expanding to 12. You didn't decide the game on the field. You didn't decide the playoffs on the field. You decided it in a committee room with 13 people. Florida State won all their games. They were punished because their quarterback, Jordan Travis, broke his leg on a dirty tackle, a hip drop tackle, ugly. And people didn't trust that Florida State with a backup quarterback could compete with Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Ohio State, Michigan, Washington. And you know what? I think they're right. I don't think Florida State does. I don't. If there's one team in there, and I'd expand it down to 7, I'd include Ohio State. If there's one team in there, I'd probably extend it to 8. I'd include Oregon. If there's one team in there that I don't think can win the national championship, it is Florida State on its backup and third-string quarterback. They've got a great defense, but I don't think they could. They struggled with Louisville. They won. But I also have to have humility. That's my opinion. Okay? That's my opinion that Florida State can't win the national championship. I would rather see Alabama. I think it'll be more entertaining than Florida State. But that's my opinion. And I have to have humility. And I've got to honor that 13-0 in a Power 5 conference. By the way, we do have to at some point say, are all these conferences equal? But still, a Power 5 conference, you won all your games, did all that was asked of you. You won with a backup quarterback. You deserve to prove you are one of the best. You deserve to be in there over an Alabama team that should pay a consequence for losing to Texas. This idea that the college football playoff season or regular season is pure and every game matters, that's been undercut now. That's been destroyed. So we all should be ready to embrace a 12-team playoff. I know I am. And I do think, I don't have anything against Alabama. Everything stuff is personal. No, it's not at all. I don't hate Alabama. I don't hate Georgia, who I don't think is in the discussion. I don't hate Ohio State. I don't like OU. I don't care for the Aggies. But I'm just telling you, imagine being a Florida State fan. Again, my producer, Patrick Hatton, is. I suffered with this through him. I'm not doing this because of him. I'm telling you, imagine being a Florida State fan and you won every game and you don't get a chance to play for the national title. That is an injustice that is only offset by the fact that I remember that Texas is in the college football playoff.